The afternoon sunlight cut through the window, carving a sharp, bright rectangle across the floor. Inside that light, a miniature city stood in perfect order. Mia sat on the rug, her focus locked entirely on the center of the grid. She held a tiny plastic tree between her thumb and forefinger, rotating it until the angle felt exact. She pressed it into the base plate with a soft, satisfying click. Her brow furrowed as she scanned the perimeter of the park, checking the alignment of every wall and street lamp. The room was silent, save for the faint sound of her breathing and the occasional scrape of plastic against plastic. She reached for a small, curved piece, her movements slow and deliberate. Every structure was a product of hours of planning, a sprawling network of towers and pathways. She leaned back, resting on her heels, and surveyed the landscape. The shadows of the buildings stretched long and thin across the rug, mirroring the quiet intensity of the afternoon. She adjusted one final block, ensuring the foundation was flush with the floor. Everything was stable. Everything was complete. She sat back, letting out a long, slow breath, watching the dust motes dance in the shafts of light that illuminated her work. The city was still waiting, perfectly contained. Tom sat on the edge of the rug, his eyes tracking a small blue piece near the center of the grid. He reached out, his fingers hovering momentarily before he committed to the move. As he pulled his hand back, his arm brushed against the tallest skyscraper. The structure wobbled, tipped, and then leaned into the next building. A chain reaction followed. The sound was sudden and violent, a sharp, rhythmic clatter of plastic hitting plastic, then the floor. The skyscraper folded, taking the park and the surrounding streets with it. Within seconds, the intricate city was a flat, chaotic heap of scattered parts. The silence that followed was heavy. Mia froze, her hands still hovering where the tree had been. Her face flushed a deep, hot red. She stood up so quickly that her knees knocked against the floor. She did not look at the wreckage. She looked directly at Tom, her hands curled into tight, white-knuckled fists at her sides. The air in the room felt thin and sharp. "You ruined everything!" she shouted. The words hit the walls and bounced back, loud and jagged. Tom flinched as if struck, his shoulders hunching toward his ears. The distance between them, once measured in inches of rug, now felt like a canyon. Mia stood over the ruins, her chest heaving with the force of her anger, while Tom stared at the floor. Tom's lower lip trembled, the movement sharp and involuntary. He did not look up. He scrambled backward, his palms scraping against the hard floorboards as he pushed himself away from the wreckage. His heels caught on the edge of the rug, throwing his balance off. He flailed, catching his shoulder against the doorframe. He found his footing and bolted. His feet hammered against the hallway floor, a frantic, uneven rhythm. He yanked the handle, the metal cold and unyielding for a heartbeat before it clicked open. The air outside was different. He lunged through the threshold, his momentum carrying him down the porch steps and onto the sidewalk. The afternoon light had bled away, replaced by the bruised purple haze of twilight. He did not look back. He turned the corner, his silhouette small and jagged against the darkening sky, disappearing into the vast, cooling silence. Anna moved through the kitchen, the sound of the shouting pulling her toward the doorway. She stopped on the threshold. The room was still, save for the scattered plastic bricks that crunched under her weight as she stepped inside. She looked at the wreckage, a jagged landscape of broken towers, then shifted her gaze to Mia. Mia stood in the center of the rug, her chest still rising and falling in sharp, uneven rhythms. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Anna turned her head toward the front door. It stood slightly ajar, swinging rhythmically on its hinges in the rising wind. "Where is he, Mia?" Anna asked. Mia did not answer immediately. She walked to the hallway, the floorboards cold beneath her feet. She looked out into the deepening shadows. The streetlights overhead flickered to life, buzzing as they cast long, distorted shapes across the pavement. They stepped out onto the porch together. They called his name, but their voices sounded thin and fragile against the vast, darkening expanse of the street. There was no reply. Tom walked until his legs felt like lead. He turned onto a quiet side street, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward him, reaching out from the dark brick walls of the houses. He stopped near a parked van, its side door slightly ajar. The interior looked like a dark, quiet cave, shielded from the biting wind. He climbed inside, his hands gripping the cold metal frame. He crawled into the back, pressing his spine against the corrugated wall, and pulled his knees to his chest. He closed his eyes, waiting for his breathing to slow. Then, the floor beneath him shuddered. A deep, mechanical growl vibrated through the metal, rattling his teeth. The engine roared to life, a sudden, violent sound. Tom froze. His eyes snapped open, wide and fixed on the dark ceiling. The van lurched forward, the force throwing him against the side panel. He scrambled to find a handhold, his knuckles white, but the vehicle was already picking up speed. He was no longer hiding in a stationary space. He was a passenger in a machine, moving away from everything he knew. The streetlights outside blurred into long white streaks, flashing past the gap. The street was a blur of gray pavement and flickering yellow light. Anna moved ahead, her eyes scanning the ground, searching for any sign of movement. She stopped abruptly near a storm drain. A flash of color caught her attention, a red cap, lying abandoned against the curb. She bent down, her fingers trembling as she picked it up. It was cold and damp. She looked at Mia, then back at the empty road. She did not hesitate. She pulled her phone from her pocket, her thumb moving with practiced speed to dial the local patrol. She spoke in short, clipped sentences, relaying their location and the urgency of the situation. Mia was already moving, her eyes fixed on the distant intersection, where a van had just slowed to a halt. The red lights of the vehicle pulsed like a warning. They began to run. The wind whipped against their faces, stinging their eyes, but they did not slow down. Their breath came in ragged gasps, echoing against the silent houses. Every muscle in their legs burned, but the sight of the van at the stoplight pushed them forward. They sprinted, their boots pounding against the asphalt. The van shuddered to a halt as the light turned red. The engine idled with a low, rhythmic thrum that vibrated through the floorboards. Inside the cab, the driver heard a sharp, metallic rattle from the back and cursed under his breath. He pulled the handbrake, unbuckled, and stepped out to check the rear door. As the latch clicked and the heavy door swung wide, the interior light flooded the dark space. Tom tumbled out onto the pavement, his breath coming in jagged, broken sobs. He landed hard, his knees scraping the rough asphalt. Mia reached him first, her boots skidding to a stop. She did not hesitate. She dropped to her knees and pulled him into a tight, desperate embrace, her arms locking around him as if to anchor him to the earth. She buried her face against his shoulder, her own breath hitching in her chest. "I am so sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of her relief. Anna stood a few feet away, her hands pressed to her mouth, watching the two of them huddled together on the dark street. The silence of the neighborhood returned. The sun broke over the horizon, turning the sky into a pale, clear blue. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and coming spring. Inside the house, the silence was no longer heavy or suffocating. It was light, filled with the soft sounds of morning movement. Anna moved through the kitchen, the rhythmic clink of a spoon against a ceramic bowl replacing the frantic energy of the night before. Mia stood by the window, watching the light catch the dust motes dancing in the air. She checked the hallway, then turned back to the table. Tom sat nearby, his movements quiet and deliberate. They did not speak of the van or the cold pavement. The trauma had left a thin, invisible layer of caution between them, a fragile hum of excitement that kept them moving with purpose. Anna gathered their things, checking the bag twice before nodding toward the door. They stepped outside. As they pulled away from the curb, the tension that had gripped them for hours finally began to dissolve. They were heading to the zoo. The zoo gates swung open, revealing a world of vibrant color and noise. The air smelled of popcorn and damp mulch. Anna led the way, her pace steady, while Mia and Tom walked close behind, their eyes scanning the enclosures. Near the monkey habitat, the crowd thickened. Tom reached into his pocket for a map, and the backpack slipped from his shoulder. It hit the pavement with a heavy thud, sliding toward the metal mesh. Before he could reach for it, a small, dark shape dropped from the canopy. A capuchin monkey darted forward, its fingers nimble and quick. It grabbed the strap of the bag and scrambled up the nearest branch with startling speed. Tom froze, his eyes wide as he watched his belongings disappear into the high foliage. Mia felt a familiar heat rise in her chest, a sharp, jagged spike of frustration that mirrored the night before. She saw the bag swaying precariously above, the contents rattling. Her hands curled into fists at her sides, her knuckles turning white. She took a long, jagged breath, forcing her shoulders to drop. Mia reached into the side pocket of her own bag and pulled out a small, crinkling package of peanuts. She did not look at Tom with anger, but with a steady, focused gaze. She held the bag out to him, nodding toward the base of the tree. Tom understood instantly. He stepped forward, his movements cautious, and opened the package. The sharp, dry sound of the shell cracking echoed. High above, the monkey paused, its head tilting to the side. Mia stood perfectly still, her eyes tracking the animal as it descended branch by branch. She whispered to Tom, keeping her voice low and rhythmic. They moved in perfect unison, backing away slowly to create a clear path. The monkey dropped to the lower limbs, its tail twitching with interest. Tom tossed a single peanut near the base of the trunk. The monkey leaped down, snatched the treat, and dropped the backpack. Mia lunged forward, grabbing the strap before it could slide back. She pulled the bag to her chest, then turned to Tom. He was smiling, a genuine, wide expression of relief. They had done it together. The sky turned a bruised purple, and the air grew heavy with the scent of ozone. Within seconds, the first heavy drops hit the pavement, kicking up dust before turning the path into a series of dark, slick mirrors. The crowd around the elephant habitat erupted into motion. People sprinted toward the main gates, shoulders hunched, faces shielded by maps and bags. Mia grabbed Tom's arm, not to pull him away, but to keep him close as the surge of bodies pushed past them. They scrambled toward a small wooden awning jutting out from a nearby kiosk. It was narrow, barely enough space for two, but they squeezed in, pressing their backs against the rough, damp wall. Rain hammered against the tin roof, a deafening roar that drowned out the distant trumpeting of the elephants. Mia pulled a single umbrella from her pack, popping it open to catch the spray blowing in from the side. They stood shoulder to shoulder, the fabric of the umbrella creating a small private dome. Tom looked at the flooded path, then at Mia, and let out a sharp, surprised laugh. Mia joined him, the sound of their combined mirth cutting through the storm. The storm broke as quickly as it had arrived, leaving the zoo path slick and reflecting the low amber light of the setting sun. Mia folded the umbrella, shaking the last droplets onto the gravel. They stepped out from under the awning, the air now crisp and smelling of damp earth and pine. The crowds had thinned, leaving the long, winding path toward the exit quiet and bathed in a warm, golden glow. Mia kept her pace steady, matching Tom's stride as they moved past the now empty habitats. There was no rush, no frantic energy, just the rhythmic sound of their footsteps. She looked at Tom, who was watching the long shadows stretch across the grass. He reached out, his hand brushing her arm as they navigated a puddle. A gesture of casual, instinctive trust. They did not speak of the broken city or the fear of the previous night. They did not need to. The day had tested them with small, unpredictable obstacles, and they had met each one as a team. As they reached the main gate, the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep shades of violet and orange. Mia realized then that the city of plastic bricks was just a fragile thing, easily shattered and easily replaced. The connection between them was something far more durable. They walked toward the parking lot, side by side, their shadows merging into one as they headed home, the tension entirely dissolved.